As the insider-exclusive investigative news team travels across America producing the Justice in America Network TV series, we invite you to join us as we uncover real stories about the issues that promote justice and fairness for injured people, safeguards victims' rights, and the opportunity to help guide the hands of justice, especially when people's lives have been destroyed, families ruined, dreams lost, or widespread societal change and reform are needed. These true stories about real, ordinary people, their real lives, always up close and personal, and always unfiltered stories of unimaginable pain, suffering, and great wrongs, but also of courage and faith and the dauntlessness of the human spirit. These stories are also about the trial lawyers who helped these ordinary people navigate a very complex legal system to get justice as they faced extreme life-altering adversities, and how the government and big business with their million-dollar PR campaigns are slowly eroding our rights to seek justice and making an end run around the civil justice system. Our TV stories show relief and vindication for shattered lives and seemingly lost souls. The compassion, warmth, love, and determination of the human spirit found within these shows are neither imagined nor contrived. They are truly personal crusades and telling journeys of what it means to seek justice in the American courtroom. In this insider-exclusive network TV special, Justice in America, The Truths and Myths of Tort Reform, we visit with Lawrence Bohm, founder and lead trial attorney, the Bohm Law Group, as he takes us inside today's legal system, examining lawyers' strategies, clients' thoughts, and in vivid detail, showing you the often heartbreaking stories of these clients, dramatically demonstrating what motivates trial lawyers to fight for their clients' causes. Some of these same trial lawyers have been in the crosshairs of attacks by so-called tort reform advocates for the past 30 years. These attacks are not new. Now, a lot of you have heard and read about tort reform, but really don't understand how or what it really means, or how it affects us negatively every time we walk into the courtroom. So in this special Network TV Insider exclusive documentary, Justice in America, The Truths and Myths of Tort Reform, we will show you how tort reform is making justice more and more difficult for the average American. And we're not going to do it by words or fancy language, but by inviting you along to meet our guests and their lawyers in small towns and big cities filmed across America, who've had the unfortunate bad luck to be severely injured or victimized by big businesses, the government, or law enforcement. These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few companies and individuals do the right thing. And you need trial lawyers who wage a battle with their own financial resources to get their clients justice. But before we get started, just for the record, let's define what the heck tort reform means in simple language. Tort is a legal term describing the system of compensation used by the courts to assign remedies, awards, and damages for harm done by one party to another, be it to their person, property, or other protected interest. Tort law defines what constitutes a legal injury and establishes liability. It's the civil court's answer to criminal law. Tort reform, then, is the political term for the controversial issue of reducing tort litigation, awards, damages, and/or compensation. Now, tort reform isn't one single idea or law. Instead, it's a group of ideas and laws designed to change the way our civil justice system works. While each tort reform law is different, they all share one or more of the following goals: to make it more difficult for injured people to file a lawsuit, to make it more difficult for injured people to obtain a jury trial, and to put limits on the amount of money injured people receive in a lawsuit. Keep in mind that throughout history, our civil justice system has kept Americans safe by allowing them a fair chance to receive justice when they are injured by the negligence of others, even when it means taking on the most powerful corporations. When corporations and their CEOs act irresponsibly by cutting corners on safety, producing unsafe products, polluting our environment, or swindling their employees and shareholders, the last resort to hold them accountable is in our courts. The legal system provides justice to those injured by deliberate misconduct and deters future misconduct by holding wrongdoers accountable. Lawrence Bohm, our featured guest, represents everyday people across the U.S. focusing on employment law and workplace litigation. And that includes all types of employment discrimination, such as sex discrimination or harassment and retaliation, which are pervasive, destructive, social, legal, and ethical problems. And it's a problem many workers have not escaped. By law, every person has the right to work in an environment free of intimidation. Laws such as the Civil Rights Act stop a workplace employee from getting away with unacceptable conduct, such as nonverbal and physical bullying and intimidation, sexual harassment, and unwarranted performance-related actions, such as a sudden demotion. But workers are up against legislation and a court system that heavily favors big business and not the average individuals. Lawrence Bohm has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Sacramento, in California, and across the nation. He recently won a landmark $168 million verdict for his client Ani Shaporian in a sexual harassment and retaliation case. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of corporate abuse. He understands that corporate abuses are some of the most serious, enduring, and divisive social, legal, and ethical violations in the United States. The problem is not just in California, but nationwide, and its nature is institutionalized. And because of that, he is driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. His goals, not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure that everyone is treated with equal respect and dignity as guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. Lawrence has built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. His amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sacramento, California. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce Lawrence Bohm to the show. Welcome to the show.
It's my joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What kind of law do you practice?
We are a trial litigation firm, which means we stand up for the little guy in the courts and argue cases to juries. And these would include, of course, personal injury type car accident cases, medical malpractice cases, and something we do a lot of, employment disputes like race discrimination, sexual harassment, those things.
Right. This special documentary that we're doing deals with tort reform, the myths and the truths of tort reform. What is tort reform?
Tort reform, while it can be organized or unorganized, it's an idea. Mm-hmm. It's an idea that people are getting too much money in exchange for their damages.
Individuals suing businesses, organizations, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, generally that's how. Nobody's feeling sorry for a business that sues a business or thinks that they shouldn't be able to do that. Tort reform is really about taking the right to a jury trial away from the people, mm-hmm. and or trying to limit how much a person can recover when they go to a jury and get a verdict or an award.
Yeah. Who's really behind tort reform and why?
Well, I think if you look at the issue carefully and you track it back through history, you're going to see two powerful forces really influencing the shape of tort reform. Surprisingly, one of them is a religious faction. The idea that we should forgive and we should forget and we should let bygones be bygones. Historically, that's where the fuse of tort reform was lit, that we shouldn't have to be worrying about being sued by our community members because they were negligent and crashed into us. We need to forgive and forget. But that frankly, legitimate theme in some respects got popularized by very powerful corporate interests, including, of course, insurance companies, which largely is responsible for paying the verdicts and settlements of cases that are brought to court. And the issue about that is these insurance companies, although employing human beings, of course, they are not people. They are treated under the law as though they are people, but in reality, they are immortals. They don't die. They don't have children. They are not having feelings. Companies don't have feelings. They are a construct of paper made out of whole cloth and give a protection to a company that our everyday people, I don't think, really understand. And so these powerful forces and very rich, wealthy sources hooked on to the religious theme of can't we all get along, to forgive is divine, don't bring your cases to court. And they've sort of sandwiched that message, and I think most notably this started, of course, after the McDonald's case, which in every jury I pick, somebody says the McDonald case is the example of the frivolous case. Well, it's not, folks.
Yeah.
McDonald's is actually the example of where tort reform picked up steam in a big way, because McDonald's got beaten legitimately. They brewed their coffee hotter than it should have been, causing very bad injury. But what people don't know is what happened after that story. How McDonald's took a loss and then decided that they would repackage it. And I can't even say it's McDonald's, it's these same forces together. This insurance industry comes up with this idea of let's take verdicts like the McDonald's verdict or other seemingly strange verdicts to the outside and run those up the flagpole as examples of bad plaintiffs and bad lawyers. And they exist.
Yeah.
There are some bad plaintiffs and there are some bad lawyers. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. The insurance industry and big business has done a pretty good job of convincing a majority of Americans today that there are quote unquote greedy trial lawyers filing frivolous lawsuits in pursuit of jackpot justice, right?
That's what they tell every jury every time.
Now, let's deal with frivolous lawsuits. If a lawyer files a lawsuit that is frivolous, in other words, has no substance, what happens to him and what happens to that case in every court in the country?
And the case will not be won and will be thrown out because it's frivolous.
It'll be dismissed.
That's what frivolous means, is there's no basis.
What happens to the lawyer who files frivolous lawsuits?
Could end up sanctioned and their reputation will go wrong. But here's the thing that people don't get.
Yeah.
There's also something called a frivolous defense. And regrettably, there are almost no consequences to these lawyers who come to court with the arguments of, no, your face ran over our windshield. Our windshield didn't run over your face. It's just, you're looking at this one case we tried just last year. The woman ran a stop sign with her own child in the car and T-boned a plaintiff. But their lawyer argued in court that she acted reasonably when she ran the stop sign because, after all, we all talk to our kids every day in the car.
This was a defense?
This was their defense. And believe it or not, they got one vote.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just don't get it. We all text and talk on the phone, and probably some of us do it when we're driving when we shouldn't. Just because it's a typical occurrence doesn't mean that you haven't acted with want of care. That's what it's all about. Has the person acted with reasonable care? And there's nothing wrong with the tort system. For example, in California, we have a cap on damages you can get from your doctor. That cap is more than 20 years old.
Yeah.
So that means that the $250,000 maximum you can get for your pain and suffering, That in today's 2013 dollars is not the same as what it was 20 years ago.
But let's look at that cap for a second. And these are medical malpractice cases in the state of California. I think the micro law, which is what it's called, was signed into law in 1976. Let's look at the end result of this. For people who have no economic value, in other words, they don't have a job, they're unemployed, they're old, and they have been injured by a surgeon or by a doctor. There are many lawyers that will no longer take their case because they can't make money with the case, correct?
You have to be a crusader to take those kinds of cases.
Because explain the math to us.
Here's the math. You can only get $250,000
for non-economic damages, pain and suffering.
Right, for pain and suffering. If you're a high-powered CEO of an upstart, IT company in San Jose making $1 million a year, then
you have an economic value.
You have an economic loss, so that's going to be a huge case. But still, your family's sadness and grief over what happened, or if you're mutilated by a doctor, they cut off the wrong arm. The most you will get is $250. It's called a 250 case. But let me tell you what's really annoying about that is here's the insurance industry getting basically a 20-year investment on their return where people can't get more than $250,000 for over 20 years. But what do they tell us when we call them and say, hey, this is a really bad case, it's clearly damages over $250? They say, no. $250 is the starting point. Of that would be for the worst possible case that ever happened. So your number is somewhere between 0 and 250. And that's where this micro law is really going wrong, because now the insurance companies are digging in, knowing that the trial lawyer, your lawyer folks, they have to spend on a medical malpractice case probably between 10 and 100 or 1,000 or more on all the doctors necessary to testify. Who wants to spend that to make $250,000?
Yeah, and that's what I want our audience to understand. It costs a lot of money to prosecute these cases.
A lot of money.
A typical expert, for example, if he has to go to court, he's going to charge, $15,000 to $25,000, right?
Sometimes yes, depending on how much work or more. And people can scoff at that and say, well, that's just lawyers buying doctors. That's not what's going on, folks. The doctors who are brave enough to give testimony against other doctors or hospitals or in support of the people, politically, they find themselves in dire straits when it comes to getting the great job or getting the great pay. So, these doctors who are kind enough and caring enough to tell the truth in court and support an injured person in their case, these are brave folks, and they're usually keeping a very good business on hold while they're dealing with telling the truth.
Well, not only that, but they're ostracized too.
Absolutely.
By other physicians because they draw the line.
And they cross the line.
They cross the line, they draw the line. How do we change the vast majority of Americans' perception that tort reform is not good? It is directly negatively affects the average everyday person. How do we change that perception?
Education. And it goes all the way back to elementary school physics. I'm not talking about something that's a political platform or mysterious. I'm talking about our fundamental civil justice system. This is a country that was made great because historically we would allow one person to go to court and talk to 12 peers and get something and to balance out that harm. Now what they're basically done in terms of balancing out the harm, they've taken their thumb and put it on the scale so that scale will never actually balance. It locks up because it cannot go above $250,000.
Right. Through your trials, through your verdicts, do you see people changing their idea of what is the right thing to do for their fellow man?
Yes. The good news for the people who care about this issue and are trying to fight tort reform is that when I get my time with the jury and I have the opportunity to explain our justice system and that they took an oath to follow the law, and I even identify what a tort reformer looks like, in terms of they're the person that goes into the jury and says $0 on a case is worth at least something, that I prepare them to deal with that with arguments about the law, and that we cannot substitute our personal ideas about things for what the law has in place. And the other exciting thing is, fortunately, I would say, because MICRA, that cap on damages for medical malpractice, is resulting in obvious, stupid results. Babies die and the family gets $250,000. Right.
People don't get a day in court.
Right. The same baby, if it was backed up over by a FedEx driver or a commercial driver, that case is worth millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
But if it happened because a doctor was drunk when he did the surgery, well, then that's just $250,000. And that's not threatening health care. What's threatening health care is that the insurance companies and the doctors sometimes are not as careful as they have to be, because in the end, it's just going to end with a MICRA cap, and that's not as scary to them across the board.
Right.
So how are we going to ruin the country by giving people the justice that they deserve? In fact, what's happening is we're ruining the country by taking away the fundamental freedoms and liberties that people had from the beginning.
Yeah, by imposing these verdicts.
By imposing caps.
Yeah, but by imposing big verdicts, it helps them, it encourages to clean up their act, doesn't it?
Definitely does. Yeah. And it gets the public excited about what's going on. It gets them to understand that something major is happening. And we should be paying attention to why there was this big verdict here or big verdict there. And I think it also helps them to understand and feel safer that when they go out into their community, that if something happens, if an accident happens, that their own family and their personal life isn't going to get ruined because there is not enough resources to take care of the problem that was caused by the negligence in the first place.
We'll keep up your excellent work, and we're rooting for you, and hopefully people will understand what's really going on. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.